Hey guys, my name is Francisco Hernandez and today I'm doing a retouching tutorial. I wanted to make this video for those of you who asked recently how I retouch my shots. But before I start, I do want to let you guys know that the workflow that I'm going to be going over in this video, what I'm going to do is something that I've been doing since maybe 2011, so almost a decade now. And the reason why I edit the raw file in Lightroom, export as a JPEG, and then edit that JPEG in Photoshop is because back in 2011 when I had slower computers, it was just a lot less hassle on my computer, and I found that it worked for social media. It looked really good on social media, and also whenever I printed. So that's what I've been doing since then. But I do want to learn so much about retouching in the next couple of weeks and then make an updated version about what I learned since now. I'm actually curious if you guys do this as well, edit the JPEG in Photoshop rather than the raw file in Photoshop. If you do that, let me know in the comment section below. Before I continue, I do want to let you guys know that this video is sponsored by Skillshare. If you don't know what Skillshare is, it's an online learning community where millions of people come together to take the next step in their creative journey. Skillshare offers thousands of classes for creative and curious people on topics including photography, illustration, design, freelancing, and so much more. The creative classes on Skillshare are designed for real life and all the circumstances that come with it. These lessons can help you stay inspired, express yourself, and introduce you to a community of millions. I realize that you guys are watching this tutorial right now to figure out how to retouch your photos a little bit better, but I highly recommend you guys check out the classes that are available on Skillshare as well. I've been doing that a lot lately, and I've learned a couple of things here and there from different creators online. One class that I looked into recently is called Lightroom Classic CC, a total beginner walkthrough by Tabitha Park. I wanted to check out this class because, as I said before, sometimes I might feel like I know a program like the back of my hand, and then I'll go ahead and watch a tutorial like this one and discover something that I didn't know before. Skillshare was made to learn, so there's no ads, and they're always launching new premium classes so you can stay focused and follow where your creativity takes you. At less than $10 a month for an annual subscription, Skillshare is definitely affordable, and I highly recommend you guys check it out. If you guys want to check it out, you can use my link in the description, because the first 1,000 people to use my link in the description area below will get a free 2-month trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just jump right into the photo now. This is a photo from a photo shoot I did with my friend Joe. He actually set up the shoot and invited me to it, so I want to say thanks to Joe for inviting me to the photo shoot, Suzette for modeling, and Ashley as well for assisting. The very first thing that I see about this image that I want to adjust is the color temperature. I do shoot auto white balance, and that does a good job for most of the time, but for this image I feel like 50-50 is a little bit too cold. I'm gonna go to 5400, and now I feel like there's a little bit too much green tones in the skin, so I'm gonna go ahead and adjust the tint to 14. And now I'm gonna go ahead and just bump the exposure up a bit because it's a little too dark, and I'm gonna go ahead and just also reduce the highlights because I feel like it's a little too bright now. I am also going to increase the shadows because they are a little too dark. And after that, I feel like there's no other adjustments in the exposure that I need to do. And I'm going to move on to the color, which I always bring up the color a lot by adjusting the calibration section. The blue primary saturation slider, I bring it up to 80. And whenever I do that, I get a lot of orange and a lot of blues showing up too much. In this specific shot, I feel like the oranges in the skin on her face are the only part where it's a little too orange. So I'm going to go ahead and get the adjustment brush, that's K, and I'm going to go ahead and paint some desaturation in the face where I feel like it's a little too saturated. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and just go to the saturation, go all the way to -100. The reason why I have it such an extreme level is because when I paint on that effect, I can see exactly what's being affected and then just reduce the effect to wherever I want it to be. So here's a before and after. This is before, this is after. It's actually very, very subtle, but you can see that I desaturated the skin just a little bit because it was a little too orange. And now what I'm gonna do is increase the exposure of the eye. I'm gonna zoom in again. And I do have an adjustment or a preset for the eyes. You guys can see all the settings right here. I'm going to apply that to just the eyes to make them pop just a little bit. And I'm actually going to increase the exposure from 1 to maybe 1.5. And I'm also going to delete it so you guys can see exactly what it did. Control or Command Z to bring it back. And you can actually hold down O on the keyboard to show you exactly what you painted on. Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out, see if anything else needs to be adjusted. And actually the exposure on the ground is a little too bright. It's stealing some tension away from Suzette. So I'm going to go ahead and just darken that and see exactly if I like it or not. I'm going to go to exposure and go ahead and just reduce it to maybe 1 stop, and then increase the brush size using the right bracket next to the P. And then I'm going to go ahead and just paint some of this darkness onto wherever I feel like it's too bright. And I feel like that did a good job right there. I'm going to hit delete and then add it back on. Maybe I'm going to go to -0.8. And I feel like that does a good job right there. And again, the whole point of adding that darkness is because I want that attention to be on Suzette. And whenever the ground was too bright, it was stealing away that attention. So aside from that, the other thing that I'm going to use the adjustment brush for is I want that background to be much more colorful. So I'm going to go ahead and get the saturation effect again. I'm going to go to 100% or 100 on the slider, and then paint the background so that the color shows a lot more than it is right now. I did paint on her face intentionally right now because what I can do is just hold down Alt and then delete that effect that I just applied on just her face. So I don't want the skin to be, or her face to be too saturated. I want that saturation just on the sky. So I'm painting away that extra saturation off of her face. So I'm going to delete the effect and then apply it back on so you guys can see exactly what I did. And actually, when it comes to the sunset, if you ever have a sunset and you want it to be much more colorful, what you can do is reduce the exposure just a little bit as well as the highlights, because when you darken that exposure just a little bit, it brings back that color and makes it more saturated. So I'm going to show you guys exactly that effect. Maybe reduce the highlights -40, maybe -25, and then reduce the exposure maybe -0.1. And then I'm going to go ahead and just delete it and then bring it back. And you guys can see exactly how it brought that color just a little bit more back into the shot. Before, after. Big difference. And after just maybe less than 10 minutes. So now I'm going to go ahead and just adjust the crop because it is a little bit off horizon. But I'm not going to correct it too much because she is also tilted a little bit, her head. And if I corrected the horizon completely, then she'd be a little bit too tilted. So I'm trying to find a balance between the two, and I think I just found it right now. Aside from that, I don't feel like there's anything else I can do to this image to improve it. And now I'm going to go ahead and just export this photo as a JPEG using the settings that I'm about to show you right now. You guys can see that the quality is 100. I don't limit the file size, color space, sRGB, all that stuff that you're seeing on the screen right now. And supposedly for printing, you want the resolution to be 300. But yeah, so I'm going to export this photo and then work on it in Photoshop right now. The absolute first thing I always do with my photo in Photoshop is remove distractions. So that could mean pimples and blemishes or other things like little flies showing up in the shot or little mismatching wood chips on the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove those using a blank layer and then using a mixture of the patch tool, spot healing brush, and the clone snap tool to remove all of these distractions. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through that so you guys can see exactly what I did. So what I did so far was remove the distractions on her face and the background as well. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the face first. I'm going to take off the effect or the layer and then add it again. Zoom out, show you guys what I removed around the entire image. So I'm going to label this distractions and then move on to frequency separation, because when it comes to deciding if I'm going to do a frequency separation or dodge and burn first, I try to see if there's a lot of contrast in the image, and if there is, then I'll go ahead and work with frequency separation first to kind of smooth the skin just a little bit, and then I'll go ahead and use dodge or burn to then add a little bit more contrast if it needs it. So in order to do frequency separation, you're going to add a blank layer, and then you're going to hit Command or Control Alt Shift E. It makes a copy of the entire image. I'm going to hit Command or Control J to copy that layer, and then I'm going to label them color on the bottom and then texture on the top. Again, the whole point of using frequency separation is to separate color and texture of the image so that you can adjust those two things separately and not, affecting each other. I'm going to deselect the texture layer and then blur the color layer, filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and then I'm going to zoom in just a little bit and then change the radius so that I can get a blurry image but not too in focus. So I feel like 6 is exactly where it needs to be. So I'm going to take off the preview and then put it back on so you can see exactly the amount of blur that I'm going to be applying. Click OK, then go ahead and reveal that texture layer again. Click image, go to apply image, and then go to the layer here. You want it to make sure that it's going to be the color layer. And then you're going to change the blending mode to subtract, and then use these settings here. Click OK, then go to the blending mode, and you're going to change it to linear. And now you have the image separated in texture and color. I do typically use actions to speed through all of that and do all this stuff automated, but I don't have them ready yet, and I'm going to go ahead and just wait for my future retouching tutorial to provide them for you. When it comes to frequency separation, you can easily overdo it, so I try my best not to do that. What I usually do is I use the lasso tool and select certain areas of the skin that I feel could be a little bit more smooth, and then I apply a little bit of blur to that. So I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to go ahead and select maybe this area of the skin, this cheek. And you want to be careful not to get too much into areas where it's different color, like over here with the eye, the makeup right here, or the hair over there. So I'm going to go ahead and go to filter, go to blur, Gaussian blur, and then I'm going to adjust the radius so that it is smoothing the skin, but not too much. So this level right here at 10 is pretty good. So now I'm going to move on to other areas, and then I'm going to go ahead and click Control. It is Control Alt Shift F, Alt Control F, or Alt Command F. And you can also apply that effect by just clicking on it right here where the filter is. And then I'm going to go ahead and just apply that to different areas of the skin that I feel it could be smoother. Okay, so what I did so far was add a little bit of smoothness to the skin using the lasso tool, and then blurring that color a little bit in Gaussian blur. And what I'm going to do now is something that's a little complicated. I'm going to use what's called the mixer brush. And basically what that allows you to do when you have the color layer selected is it basically moves the color around. So I'm going to show you guys exactly that and why I use it. In order to select the mixer brush, you have to hold down the click on the brush tool over here, and then click on mixer brush tool. I do usually have a shortcut for that, which is usually N on my keyboard. But again, this is a new version of Photoshop that I installed today, and I don't have any of my presets. You can see on the top all the different settings that I use. I'm basically going to use this brush to add some of this darkness on over here where I feel like it's too bright. I feel like right here is bright, here's dark. So I'm trying to just smoothen those transitions a little bit using the mixer brush. So now that I applied the mixer brush, the shifting of the colors, let me show you exactly how that looks like before and after. Before, after. So it is kind of a heavy-handed effect, but you want to make sure that you don't apply it too oddly or mess up around on this effect. So if you do mess up, what you can do is hold or click on the folder that's holding the texture and the color, and then add a mask, and then paint off areas where you might have messed up. Or you can also just reduce the opacity of the overall effect, and then you can get somewhere like where it's, if you went too far and made it too porcelain, too perfect, then you can reduce the opacity and make it more realistic. So now I'm going to go ahead and start with dodge and burn, and the way that I start is I'm going to go ahead and get a curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to raise the exposure up a level, and then invert the mask to hide the effect. I'm actually going to move it up over here. I'm going to label that dodge. And then I'm going to get another curves adjustment layer and do the opposite effect. I'm going to make it darker one level. And then I'm going to invert that mask. And then I'm going to call that one burn. D and B for dodge and burn, not Dave and Buster's. And now I'm going to go ahead and just add what I call a helping layer. And basically what I'm going to add right now is a black and white adjustment layer. And the reason why I do that is because when it comes to adjusting the highlights or the shadows and the highlights, you're seeing a lot of color in the image as well, and it's kind of distracting you from those different levels of darkness and brightness. So by removing the color and adjusting the reds and the yellows, which I'm about to do, you can highlight the flaws of the skin, those different areas of brightness and darkness, and you can see exactly where the flaws are so you can correct them with dodge and burn. I do want to quickly point out the opacity is 24%. I'm actually going to reduce it to 20%. I usually have the opacity at 100 with the flow at 1%, but with this new version of Photoshop, it's applying the effect way too fast at 100%. So I'm going to go ahead and just reduce it to 20. So what I did right now is I did local dodge and burn. That means I'm zoomed in and I'm getting small details or small little areas of brightness and darkness. And I'm going to just show you guys how it looks like off and on. So this is before and this is after. So if you guys want more of a detailed look of what I'm adjusting, I'm going to go ahead and hold down Alt and click on the dodge. You can see exactly what I dodged, and then click on the burn so you can see exactly what I burned. And now what I'm going to do is do global dodge and burn. That means zooming out and applying darkness and brightness to different areas throughout the entire image rather than zoomed in. I didn't really do much with the global dodge and burn, but it is an effect that's there. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys before and after. It's very subtle. I just made the ground a little bit darker and then a little bit of the area of the tree brighter. And aside from that, I didn't really do much. And now I'm going to go ahead and work with the color. And the way that I manipulate the color is I use the selective color adjustment layer. So I'm going to go ahead and break out that layer, selective color. And I adjust the reds and the yellows mainly, but there are some greens going on and some blues. So I'm going to manipulate all of those different things. I'm going to first focus on just the background. So I'm going to manipulate the colors to get a background that I really like, and then work on the skin tones after that. There isn't an exact science when it comes to using manipulating the colors like this. I just try to move the sliders left and right to see exactly if I like the effect that it's applying or not, and then I just kind of just go from there. So as you can see right now, the sky in the background is something that I do really like, but the whole color on her and the ground around the around her is very weird looking. So I'm gonna go ahead and I can either keep the effect applied on and then paint off the effect, or do the exact opposite and hide the entire effect and just paint it on the background. So I'm gonna do that. So again, I have everything hidden by black, so I need to paint white to reveal that extra saturation in the color. So now that I have applied the effect only in the background, I'm going to show you guys the before and then the after. And I'm going to go ahead and get another selective color adjustment layer. And then this time I'm going to just focus on just the skin tones. Let me show you guys without the first selective color, then with it, and then with the second adjustment made. And now after that, what I'm going to do is just maybe add a little bit more saturation to just this background, just the sky, and then I should be done and we'll be finished. After I added a little bit of saturation to the sky only, I felt like the image is just a little too saturated, so I'm going to go ahead and just bring down the saturation -5, and then I feel like it's good now. And now the only thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of contrast, which I usually do using the levels adjustment layer, and I usually bring it to something like 4, and that goes ahead and just adds a little bit more saturation and contrast to the image. So there's the before and there's the after. And usually what it does is it also makes the image just a little darker, so I'm going to go ahead and just add a slight little bit of brightness using the curves adjustment layer. And then I usually go too far and then just reduce the opacity to something like maybe 20 to 25%. Here's the extra contrast I just added, before, after. And after that, I'm pretty much done. The only thing I'm gonna do now is just resize for Instagram, which I usually get the crop tool out for, the C, and then change the ratio from original to 4:5. And for this specific shot, I don't have to do any sort of stretching of the images, which is something I usually do. And yeah, so I can just crop this image like that, and it'll be ready for Instagram. And that's pretty much everything that is involved with this tutorial. Maybe I'll go ahead and just add a little bit more color balance, or actually I will use the color balance tool to adjust the shadows, midtones, and highlights and see how that looks like. So I'm gonna do that and then I should be done. So yeah, it is just a slight difference, but it is a difference. I'm gonna just reduce the opacity to maybe 75%. And after that, I just need to resize down. And the way that you wanna resize the photo down is to hit Control I think it's, let me, image, and then there's image size right there. It's Alt Control I. And then what you want to do is whatever the longest side is, you want to make sure that that's 2048 pixels. 2048 pixels. And that's going to be the best for sharing on Instagram or Facebook. And it's going to go ahead and do that. It's going to resize down. And then all I have to do now is just save the image, save a copy of it, and then share that on Instagram and Facebook. And that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it helped you out in some way at all. And I look forward to you guys learning in other videos that I make. So I'll see you guys in the next videos. And let me know what videos you want to see in the comment section below, and I'll go ahead and work on those videos for you. All right, take care guys, and I'll see you in the next video.